Welcome back to Digging Deeper. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we have with us a new first-time guest. We have Chip Holmes. He is an internal consultant for our RPO team, just years of experience in the world of talent acquisition. We have an old familiar guest with us who always brings a lot of energy and insight. That is Kyle Jernigan. What's your title now?
This week I'm a solutions architect.
Okay, solutions architect. I, of course, am the Dave from Digging Deeper with Dave. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Randall Reilly. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm just going to go ahead and, before we get started, launch a quick poll here.
A poll?
Yep.
All right. Dare you to answer.
I might have hit the wrong button, hit the wrong button. All right. I'd like to know if this is your first time on Digging Deeper or if you are a return guest. So we will launch that poll right now and see how we're going. So that poll should be launched.
I'm not a first time.
No, you're not.
Okay.
Chip's first time. You're not first
Chip,
time.
you're in. We got a
It's my first time.
We're going to go ahead and add it to the stage real quick.
Welcome to the show, Chip.
Oh, wow.
Great
right
to be
now,
here.
we're at, let's see how many people are first time here.
Wow.
So the way this works, if this is your first time, we have a live edition of Digging Deeper, which means that the Q&A is live the entire time. And sometimes we'll do a pre-recorded episode just so we have the ability to edit and bring some graphics to the table, and then the live Q&A is after. But throughout this entire time, you are free to ask any question you want. I will thread it into what we're talking about, or we'll shift to whatever you want to talk about. I have a big outline here of what we want to go through, but you guys get to control the conversation a little bit.
It is looking pretty dead even.
Yep, pretty dead even.
Some new fresh faces and some vets.
And so let's go ahead because I know it's Friday and people, I don't know how long of an attention span we have for people on a Friday, but I'm going to go ahead and launch another poll. That I think is going to be a bit of the basis for a lot of what we talked today. Because if you looked at the title, we said, how do you actually hire a experienced technician? So my question for you is, which is more of a challenge?
Wow.
Finding quality applicants or finding enough applicants? And this is specifically, I say applicants, this is, of course, the world of technicians.
Gotcha.
So I know for a lot of you, that's diesel technicians, but for some of you, maybe automotive, marine, construction,
whatever.
With lots of different types.
It is not even close.
Right now, as you can see from the stage, most people, I think, struggle more on the side of, we'll talk about both of these, but I think most people struggle on the side of finding the experienced quality candidates. Chip, in your world of talent acquisition, do you think that's pretty common, that quality is harder to come by than quantity?
100%. You can find a bunch of people who've jumped around every 6 months. We're talking about the experience, the ones who I know are staying a long time, making a lot of money, generating a lot of money. Really difficult to find those individuals.
Well, that was the perfect segue, which is pretty cool for your first time to do just a perfect segue. I want to give you guys some stats to kind of create a bit of a scenario, paint a picture of when we talk about an experienced technician, what that looks like. So if we look at experienced technicians, we recently last year did a survey of experienced technicians. I think the average person we surveyed had over 10 years of experience in the world of being a technician. 61% of those technicians we surveyed had not changed jobs one time in the last 5 years.
So they're anchored.
Yeah, they're anchored.
Okay.
If you add to that people who had only changed jobs once in the last 5 years, that number goes up to 80%.
So wait, so 20%.
20%
flat out.
So 60 had not changed jobs once. 20% had only changed job once. So that gives you a total of 80% of the experienced technicians we surveyed had not changed jobs more than one time in the last 5 years.
That means they're not looking either.
Right. So that kind of what I want to do here is set up the picture of when we talk about quality, what are you up against? What are the scenarios that make this so difficult? So one thing is They're pretty loyal. They're not shifting jobs as often.
Yeah, if they're anchored, that means they're happy where they are, and or there's nothing that's really spurred them to think about looking for another job yet.
Right. So 60% report making more than $75,000 a year.
Okay.
And 32% of these quality technicians report making more than $100K a year.
So it's a 75 to 100 plus range for almost everybody,
right? And then
universally.
And then to add one more cherry on top, according to our research, less than 30% of all technicians are actively looking for jobs.
So they're anchored where they've been.
Right.
If I can kind of summarize.
Summarize away.
Chip, validate me. Well, I'm going to try to interpret what David just shared. They're pretty happy where they are. They're not looking for a job. They haven't changed jobs, and they're pretty well compensated off of greater than $75,000 with 30-something%, you said, over 100?
Yep.
So 30-something% are in six figures. I mean, if this doesn't have a lot of churn, I think is the phrase I've heard you use before and other folks have used. If there's not a lot of churn and they're well compensated, I think that probably lends itself to an industry where, like we saw a minute ago, quality folks are already employed and staying put. So how do you peel them off or get them active would be my problem to try to solve.
Right.
Okay.
All right. But I want to add one more thing to that that's going to make this even more difficult. So we know there's when we're trying to reach quality, they're not switching jobs as often.
Right.
There's not a huge population actively looking.
Right.
They are probably, with the way the market is, making a pretty good salary where they're at.
Okay.
All right. The thing that you have to add into that is the competition of people looking for technicians. So according to our research, generally there is at least, we do have a question that says, can these stats be sent out with references on who was surveyed and how many were surveyed? Yes, we can 100% send out the research after this webinar concludes. Josh is it.
We will get you all these wonderful stats.
Yeah. But according to our research, for every technician looking, essentially, there's somebody posting for them. So many companies, need more than one technician.
Yep.
Well, right now there's essentially one technician actively looking per company. So there's not enough going around.
Okay.
Enough to go around with the amount of competition. Chip, I think you had something before.
And I don't want to get in trouble or jump ahead.
No, go ahead.
I do want to challenge one assumption. Okay, I think that they're staying because of what they're paid. I'm not sure how happy they are. Only 21% of them, you'll get to in a minute, would recommend their current shop, which I think is an opportunity, because I think what we're seeing is that people are not always competitive in what they're offering. They want to get a quality tech, but they really don't want to pay for a quality tech, which is going to make it a bit of a challenge.
Correct.
But are they painting the picture, to your point, if a lot of them don't like where they are? Would you say 20-something% would recommend where they are? 21% would recommend their shop. So 80% of people would not recommend where they work. And I will tell you, and again, I don't want to steal this, but I would say overall, when I look at employee reviews, that's something I always do and have always historically done. In a lot of these shops, they're terrible. I mean, they're 2%, 2.2%. So they're not necessarily happy where they are. They're staying because they're making over $100,000, which gives an opportunity to somebody else who will pay them competitively and at the same time provide a better culture and some of the additional benefits to step into that void. So, but I'm probably miles ahead of where you want to be, David.
No,
so
you did another perfect segue.
So this is a quality of life, I say, problem.
Yeah.
This is the job's hard and you're making it hard on me where I work. That's what it sounds like.
So that's where we kind of set a dire picture of saying the quality is hard to reach. They're not changing jobs as often. They're not actively looking.
Right.
They're making a decent salary. However, the same group that we surveyed, as Chip said, there is hope because only 21% of them would actually recommend their shot to another technician.
So how do I multiply that? How do I get, if I'm at 20%, how do I get to 40%?
Well, there's that side of it of how do I retain?
I'm saying, how do I make my folks love being here
Right.
to refer people maybe,
Right.
or not raise their hand to go work someplace else.
But what I'm looking at it as more devious is I'm saying, even though that there are that many that they're not changing jobs as often,
Mm-hmm.
I think what it would indicate is with the right offer in front, you have a shot of landing those guys.
So I was thinking defensively. I'm thinking if I'm the employer,
Yep.
I don't want technician Dave leaving. I'm
Yeah.
going to do everything I can to make you happy. You're also saying, what do I need to do to go on offense to get another technician Dave to come to my shop?
Right.
Or my
And,
fold. Okay.
and we're not here basically saying go around poaching everybody, but there aren't enough to go around, and we are in business to make money. So you have to make your shop as attractive as possible.
Got it. I'm buying what you're selling.
So let's add on to the stats that Chip brought up. 21% only 21 would recommend their shop. 44% would consider changing jobs for more money.
Hold on a minute. So you just doubled it right there.
Yeah.
You went from 20 something to 40 something. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
44% would consider changing jobs for more money, and 21% would consider changing jobs for a better culture. So when we're talking about, if I go back and look at these polls here, give me a second. I'm trying to be fast.
It is a pay thing and a culture thing.
There are 95% of people reported on this call that quality is much harder than quantity.
There you go.
And then we've established on this call that the quality you're looking for does not change jobs as much.
Okay.
But that same quality, only 20% would recommend their shop, 44% would consider changing jobs for more money, and 21% for a better culture.
I feel like this is a wagon wheel or a bicycle wheel where I'm at the hub and it's like challenge everywhere I look.
Now, so here's another bit of hope. So Chip, you kind of brought up this idea of benefits and culture. So you may think like, well, we offer a lot of pay, which I need to catch questions and make sure I'm not missing any. We offer a lot of pay. We're still not getting any. When we asked what was the biggest influence on people accepting a job or being willing to pay, company paid health insurance was listed on par with pay for importance.
I mean, you're talking about
so it was like
it's a $2,000 a month expense.
Yeah, so it was like 62.4% said pay was the number one motivating factor, and then it was like 62.2% said that paid health insurance was the most important motivating factor.
What if the pay, Chip, tell me if you've ever heard this before so that the audience can hear it too. What if my pay is a certain dollar amount? Let's say it's $80,000, but you've got to pay 100% of the health insurance. Should I advertise $80,000 pay, or what if I can, I want to say, whip the numbers on what I'm paying versus how much health insurance is covered? And the reason I say that is we were talking about, it's $2,000 a month, it's a $24,000 expense. So if you're paying me $80,000 and you have a really good health insurance plan, you need to make sure that you overemphasize that because of the cost savings. Like when you've been recruiting and talking to people and building these plans, how can you materially advertise that cost savings to someone who may be in the market?
Yeah. No, and I think you make a point, right? So what you want to do is give them a reason to come. So what you're going to do is accentuate the most positive aspects of that company. So yes, it's really important to have the insurance. And I think that is something that we would definitely accentuate. Pay is going to be important as well, because obviously that comes in a little bit higher. So that's going to be important. If it's an even, in another poll, I saw that if it's even between the two, that health insurance is going to be the definite differentiator. So if you're at the same place from a a cost perspective from what you're paying them, then your real differentiator is in the healthcare. So, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but it's an overall package. It's just that question of why should they leave? Why should they come to you? I think it's getting beyond what I so often hear is, well, they should come because we're us, which the dealer down the street is saying the exact same thing. You should come because we're us. But the reality is, what's the overall package, the benefits, the culture, tool allowance, anything that's involved? What is it that is the reason that I should leave and jump to come to you?
I mean, if you're offering $100,000, but I've got to pay the full insurance premium, it's not $100,000 anymore. It's a $75,000.
It's definitely a benefit that we should be pushing is the insurance.
So I have a few questions here, and I want to get to them so that we don't miss out on them.
Okay.
A couple of comments. One just said, it depends on the employer.
True. Yeah, right.
Some are employees. Some people actually prefer the higher wage to the health insurance, which is, of course, true. It's definitely not across the board thing. Keep in mind the stats we are giving are biased way more towards your more experienced tech. These were all with 10 plus experience. One question here says, so what if you're paying top dollar and can't get them to move, providing a good culture, wage, and more? Then what? This was asked before the health insurance thing. I think in that case, I think health insurance is part of culture, but just making sure that health insurance thing could be a way to get them to move. So that's one thing to think about. A good culture and good wage, I would just make sure that when you say the good wage, that it is competitive to the people in your area. Yeah. Now we actually have the ability here at Randall Reilly, as your partner, we can look at what the wages are being offered at other dealerships and what's being advertised so that you can ensure that that wage is actually competitive.
Yeah. And David,
anything you would add there, Chip?
Yeah, I would say I would actually jump on that. We can provide that, and we do provide that when we're working with partners. We like to let them know. I heard someone the other day who was really smart, one of our partners, who made a recommendation. They had an individual who came in and wanted a wage that was higher than what they were being paid, significantly higher, about $7 higher. They were a very experienced tech. And based on them being there, he ran the numbers. He just on the spot ran the numbers and said, okay, so they will produce you about $1 million of revenue over the course of the next year. Pay them whatever they want. And I know that only can go so far, but the reality is sometimes we're looking at $2 or $1. And if we really ran the numbers as to what it is that they will produce, we would open our checkbook much more quickly.
Is it a penny wise?
Yeah.
What's the price?
Something like that.
Penny wise, pound foolish, I think. I don't know if that's right or not. I'm going to just say it. So.
That's it.
All right. We got another question here. And I tell everyone we try to keep these to 30 minutes, but it all depends on the amount of questions we get. And so
I'm free.
And I will add to that is anyone has to leave early, don't worry. We'll get you the full recording so that you don't miss anything. How can we sell our culture other than continuing to speak to current employees about referral bonuses? As you mentioned, most techs aren't referring people to work at shops with them. I'll take this one, but then I'll throw it to you guys right after. I think one thing that you have to think about when it comes to selling your culture is that generally people make decisions based off of emotion. And the best way to communicate emotional buy-in is through story. And so the best way to communicate your company's culture is through stories that highlight the people that you work with. Now, that is slightly different than testimonials. Testimonials can seem a little inauthentic at times.
Kind of cold.
So the more you can tell authentic stories. And then obviously you can ask these wonderful video people behind the scenes that you can't see. The most effective medium for telling stories would be video. It's not the only way, and I would use everything at your disposal, but the best way to sell your culture is through emotional means. The best way to sell emotions is through story, and the best way to tell a story is through video. What would you guys add to that?
I think you have to make life easier for someone who has a very hard job. And if you can make life a little easier for someone who has a very hard job, then they're gonna be happier. And it's just, I'm not saying creature comforts. I'm saying, how can you make their life a little bit easier? Whether it's with pay, whether it's with benefits, whether with break time, break room, tool allowances, boot allowances, uniforms, all the things like that. This is a hard, most of the time, dirty job. And do people have to come to work, or do they want to come to work? And what can you do to kind of flip the switch in making those guys and gals want to come to work for you? What is it about coming to work that they kind of find some joy or fulfillment or whatever? Or do you just grind on them to get more work orders done?
Right.
Are you managing them because there's a number on a spreadsheet and a stack of papers? Or do you genuinely care about them, their family, their happiness and joy being there? A friend of mine, he has very low turnover. He runs an HVAC repair business. You know what he does? Once a month, they're done before lunch, and he cooks steaks, and he cooks them. That's a big expense, but his folks don't leave.
Right. I want to get these, because these questions are pouring in, so I want to make sure we get to them. We got one that says, what is included in the culture? So what are all the aspects of culture? I would say anything that affects how someone feels about your business could be included in that. So that's a big umbrella. So that could be pay. Some of the things that were mentioned in this survey, which we'll send this survey out afterwards, is there wasn't as much care about, hey, is it 4 10s? Is it 5 8s? All they wanted was no forced overtime, but overtime available. They didn't want any forced work over the weekend. So these were all big components of it. 82%. This was actually one of the highest things about what makes a shop worth working at. 82% ranked proper equipment, not necessarily a tool allowance. That was in there as a certain amount, but just making sure that there's proper equipment at the shop, that they're not having to use worn out stuff or anything that is, it's always nice to have the right tool for the job.
I have a question for Chip. Is it hard to hire somebody or help somebody fill a role if where that person's going to go, they can't do the job?
Yeah, very much so. They need to have the tools in order to do the job.
Right.
So I'll tack that on to, are there culture aspects that techs value the most? If you include pay and health insurance, those are very high as culture aspects. Outside of those kind of those types of things, having proper equipment available, proper tools was very important. And then just the work-life balance and feeling respected. Those were all very, very high.
And I think that respected piece is the one that some of those other things you kind of talked about, that could be a benefit that you're listing on a job posting. I can list the pay, the benefit you offer, but do you actually thank the people and look them in the eye and thank them for doing a hard job that's pretty dirty?
Right.
Do you thank them? Do you acknowledge their value to your business? Do you celebrate them in any capacity? Is it an anniversary that you celebrated them working there? Is it their birthday? Is it their kids got baseball and is well known in the community, and you just acknowledge them one day at work about how great their kid is? Like, how do you make them feel about working there? I think is the piece that a lot of people miss.
All right, let's get to Let me get to one more question real quick, and then I'm going to throw it over to you to Chip, because there's a bunch of questions kind of in the same vein. So I'm going to ask these, and I'm going to kick it over to you, Chip, because you have more experience than all of us on this. All right. So one of them was, what about 20-somethings that don't prioritize health insurance? Another question is, are these stats nationwide? So yes, these stats were nationwide and still are. And then someone says, and I think this is something to consider with the previous question about what about 20-somethings that don't prioritize health insurance? And Joyce says the key is to customize the package based on what the employee's preference are, which I think is a great tip there. So in that same vein of just what is important, how important is culture, how do we tell these stories? Chip, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, first of all, I agree with the video concept. I think I've presented that to several of our partners, and I think it's a great idea. I also agree with what Kyle said about tangible and intangible benefits. I think all of that makes up Insofar as what we're selling, the two things I'd say is it's a holistic package to the question that came in. So you can't say, well, my health insurance is great, so I'm not going to pay anything. The 20 somethings are going to prioritize that, and everyone's going to prioritize that. So that's important. I also think when we're looking at this overall cultural picture and what we're doing, I'm going to try to, if I could take us back one step, a lot of times our culture is aspirational. So what we say is we think we are something that really we're not perceived to be. And I come from different industries, so you all know this industry better than I do, but I can tell you that some of the largest companies in our country run focus groups asking people what they think about their culture, right? I mean, honestly, if you've got a shop with 4 or 5 people, look, give them space and ask them, what is it you most like about here? What is it you'd like to see change? What is it you'd like to see that's different? And one other thing you can do that could be painful is, as I mentioned, look at your reviews. Most of the clients we work with, there are several reviews on them. Some are great. Some are not as good. Be honest. It's easy to look and say, oh, look, all these people like this about our culture. But did some people say, oh, they say, well, we won't work Saturdays, but we really work 3 out of 4 Saturdays. Like, are you honest about what you're perceiving to be the cultural benefits of where you are? Because it's important to be honest with yourselves.
That's really well said, Chip. We talked about that exact thing. We did a digging deeper just on employment branding. And that's one thing that came up was you don't really get to decide what your culture is. The people who are in it working for you, they tell you what your culture is. You can want to improve it, but until they agree with your aspirational statement, that's not what your culture is. I think that was so well said.
And I think you're talking about the thing nobody's thinking about. It's the difference between what y'all are talking about and reality.
Right.
I think, I know on paper I'm offering this. I think my culture is this. What do I do? Well, you got to go find out. Right. So I think to Chip's point, like, how can I get that feedback, which is probably its own episode for that matter,
right? Of
how can I get that feedback from the people that really matter so that I know what I'm doing well? Okay, I'm going to emphasize this when I'm talking to somebody. What's my blind spot? What am I telling people versus what's reality? And then, okay, how can I fix that? And then if I can roll it back to what you said a minute ago and like what Chip said, then how do I tell that story?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jody also mentioned,
like we're making progress, guys.
And this was mentioned in the survey that we will send out to everybody. Jody mentions a clear career path can appeal to younger workers as well, which was
really
also
good
mentioned.
Point. Really good point.
And that was actually mentioned as most people did not feel as though they had a clear career path at their current fleet. All right, let's move on to the next phase, because I really want to get to the final point where we talk about process. Once those leads come in, if you are lucky enough to get an application from an experienced tech, don't fumble the ball at that point. And that's really why we have Chip here, because he's going to really help us there. And I have some input on that, and I know Kyle will. So briefly, because we're already at 30 minutes. So and once again, if we run out of time, please feel free.
A good one.
We will make sure you get the full recording.
Real good.
The third thing we want to talk about. So the first thing was, what if we look at your current quality technician, what are you up against? We talked about how little they're switching jobs. Mm-hmm. Secondly, we know they're not actually as satisfied at their current place of employment as you would think. There is room for you to get in there and get them to come and work for you and get that quality technician. Mm-hmm. All right. The third thing I want to talk about is if quality is a big component of what you're after, how do you actually get in front of an inactive job seeker, right? Ooh. If they're not actively looking, well, then how do you if you do all this work to get your wage competitive and get your health insurance where it needs to be, and you've got great stories of your culture, how do you actually get this in front of the right people?
You got to get moving.
All right. So one thing we can talk about is, I know a lot of the people on this call and a lot of people we talk to and clients we talk to use a job board such as Indeed or ZipRecruiter. That's perfectly fine. I think that needs to be a component of your hiring and talent acquisition. That's perfectly fine. However, if only 30% are actively looking, Indeed is much better at reaching active job seekers. I think they're starting to have some things that, reach out to less active people. However, one way to get in front of inactive seekers is finding in areas that are not built around the idea of actively looking for it. They're not built around active job seeking. So that's all your social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, the display network, all these things. If you work with a good partner, and that's what we try to be,
right?
We can actually take this message that you've crafted, and we can actually help you craft that message, and we can put it in front of people who are not actively seeking, people that are verified tool buyers. Even if you don't want to work with us, you have to figure out a way to get that message in front of an inactive audience, an audience that are technicians but aren't actively looking for jobs. Another way I would say is, we have that side of things where the more lead gen side, also a good RPO specializes in reaching out and finding these things, and it all works together. I mean, not all RPOs have the level of digital expertise that we have, but
humble brag.
But our RPO team specializes in finding these inactive quality candidates so that you actually have a shot of landing these quality techs. I don't want to spend up too much time on this. I'll let you guys have about 2 minutes each to talk about this, but because we got to get to the last point. But I think the main point here is, yes, active job seekers and Indeed and ZipRecruiter and job boards have to be a portion of how you acquire talent.
Agreed.
However, because so few of the quality techs are actively looking,
okay,
the way to get your message in front of them cannot just be utilizing job boards where active job seekers are.
You just said it. I wrote active versus passive
right
in my notes right here.
So, Chip, can you kind of tell us a little bit about how, what do dealerships and fleets and people need to be thinking about when it comes to reaching these passive job seekers that are not necessarily actively looking?
Sure, and I think that's a great point. One of the biggest complaints we hear is that people have worked with agencies that all they did was actually go out on Indeed and send them candidates, which is not what we do. We utilize our own resources here, and we are involved with the digital. So we actually have advertising, and which is a part of it. And then I think the other part is network. We build a network. We have individuals on our side that work across the board. So they have individuals that they know. We have a large audience here that we can pull from that's national. So we can reach in and find individuals. So there's a lot of different ways you have to find these people. Another one that I would just throw out quickly is referral networks, and we will work with referrals. We would encourage our partners to have actually a program where individuals can receive either pay or at least applause when they put referrals. So you need to put out, it's kind of a multi-channel approach to find these individuals that they don't know that they want a new job.
That's very well said.
Real quick.
Yeah. What would you add to that?
So just exactly what Chip is saying. I'm going to speak to kind of some of the strategy that goes into what Chip's talking about. That active versus inactive. Indeed, if they tap somebody on the shoulder that's experienced, they're probably doing that for somebody else besides you. And that's not a shot at Indeed. Indeed's trying to make money, and they're trying to help this person find a job. So that is a good practice. There's just more competition with that particular model. If you get into some of the other passive strategies, if I can get my ad in front of an experienced technician on Facebook or YouTube, there's nobody else around, right? It's my ad, then it's sort of this one-to-one opportunity. Now they're thinking about me, and they're not getting 3 or 4 other job alerts.
Right.
And so that allows me to kind of isolate, reduce competition. And it's this, I don't want to say ocean, but it's this other large pool of opportunity outside of Indeed that we're finding is very underutilized, that when we do utilize, activate it, if you will, and work with clients and work with Chip and his team, that we start seeing successes that people haven't been able to see before.
All right. We got a couple questions I want to get to before I forget. The first one is, how do you host a culture focus group without negative spiral? How do you lead those? So I think
Not it. Not it.
I think your best bet is to run internal surveys that are anonymous.
Ask Chip too. Yep.
And
He's
then
not
and they need to be anonymous so people there are honest. But essentially, you're looking for data groups. You're looking for what are the consistent things that are said that we can address. So negative things that are said consistently that we can address. If you have just one anecdotal person who's always angry, maybe that isn't as important. But what you're looking for are things that are consistently said that are areas that you're willing to address. And I think the best way to find those out is internal surveys that are anonymous. Chip, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, and I think that the only challenge is, and sometimes if you've got, say, a very small shop and you're trying to do that,
right?
A way you could phrase it positively is just to say, what are some of the things that are most important to you? And then you can kind of assess whether you're doing them well or not. So you don't require people to say, oh, we're horrible at our insurance, right? You're basically saying, what is it that you value? And then you can take that and apply it to what you're actually providing.
And you'll not only learn what's important, but you're going to learn what's important to your folks internally.
Yeah.
And then you can start to get to work on that. That leads to better culture. I think, like you're talking about, Chip.
Yeah.
If I acknowledge the negative or I can reinforce the positive, those are two things I can do to really help the culture too. Yeah. And then just make sure people see you doing the work.
Yeah.
Like, let people know, hey, we used to be like this. We're doing this. And then later on, this is what the new benefit is to us.
Right. One last question here. Feel free to keep asking. How are you able to support very low population, rural? Put the word. I think they put the word rural in there just because it's so hard to say, and they wanted to see me struggle.
Rural. I can't do it.
So, but basically, how do you support low population areas when you talk about finding people to put the message in front of? I have a stat for that.
Shocker.
58% of techs would commute up to an hour for their job.
An hour
for their job. So I think one thing you have to think about is spreading out your geographic search to a larger area. So that's one way to combat it.
35, 40 miles ish, somewhere in there.
Yeah. So I think that's one thing to think about. And then the other is a good partner, humble brag, like us. We can actually take a look at the population size of techs in your area to kind of give you a more realistic look of, okay, who's actually here? What's a realistic expectation for this program that you're doing? And then can we spread out that geographic search to find some more populous areas for people that are willing to commute for the right situation?
Yep.
Would you add anything there?
Yeah, I think it just goes back to what I said a moment ago. You're going to have to get away from just one thing that you've always done. You're going to have to get into some other engagement solutions for that particular audience that you're trying to hire. If you do the same thing you've always done, you get the same results. Congratulations, the whole definition of insanity. And I think you've got to just expand the ways that you're telling the story, the ways that you're creating awareness of your opportunity, because that guy or gal you're looking to hire, they could be on YouTube. And I'm not saying you have to have a YouTube video that's produced in a studio. I'm saying you can have your ad there. There are different things that you can do to engage them when they're checking their email. All the different social media platforms to catch them in between videos. If they're on a break or something like that, meet them where they are and then kind of start them into your pipeline. Because just because you're in a low population density area doesn't mean all hope is lost. It just means we have to have, not to give you a baseball analogy, which opening day was yesterday, you got to have more gloves in the outfield. You can't have one outfielder. You got to have at least 3 to play baseball. I'm saying you need 4 or 5. We use 10 different channels for some clients, 10 in low population areas with small budgets for each, because I know I can only spend a little bit on one particular channel.
Right.
But when I put a second one and a third one, it just allows me to get that coverage that I'm looking for.
Correct. All right.
That's my opinion.
No, I agree. Okay. Well said.
Thank you.
Let's get to our final thing, because this is where I kind of wanted to spend some time, although we're a wee bit low on time. Once again, if you need to leave us, that's fine. But we'll get you the full recording.
It's been a good one.
So we've talked about quick summary. We've talked about experienced technicians, how little they're changing. Well, even backing up before that, quality is usually the struggle for most people. If we look at quality experienced technicians, they're not changing jobs as often. However, we do believe, based off of research, that there is an opening there to convince them to change jobs. They aren't active job seekers, so in order to put that message in front of them, you have to reach. The only way to reach them is to target some inactive job seekers. And then finally, let's say you do all those things right, and I'm going to kick this one over to you, Chip. You do all those things right, and you get an application or a lead from an experienced tech. Where do you see companies going wrong at this point, Chip?
So you've done everything right. And then, Chip, take it away.
I would say needs to be easy and simple, right? It's their market, not yours. So you want to get them to come. When it comes to applications, I know a lot of companies say, well, we need the full application. We need everything filled out. And we even need them to go through 2 tests. I'm not saying you don't need to do that. Put it on the back end. Yeah. In the beginning, there are a lot of companies that have literally a 2-minute application process. And then you go through the interviews. Once there's interest expressed, then they're happy to fill out everything else they need to fill out to get. I think it's important to make it as simple as possible. Automate everything you can. Give them access 24/7 instead of having access only 9 to 5. And then I think that additionally, what you need to do is stay in communication with them. It's got to move quickly, right? I know in the past people would say, well, we need to take them through 4 interviews and we need to compare them with 3 people. Listen, if they're really good and you've got them interested now and you've brought them in, they're probably going to start to be interested in other things as well. And the reality is, in the same way that we're going after passive candidates, so are our competitors. So they're going after them as well. So by the time they go in to have that interview with you, they may have 2 other offers on the table. And the numbers tell us that they get 2 offers and then they accept one of them. So the reality is, you just want to move. If you know you want them, you want to move them quickly through the process. If there are things you say, well, what do? I want 3 people to speak to them. Then have a panel interview and have 3 people speak to them at one time. Make sure you're not replicating questions. Just make it go as quickly and as painlessly. And as you go through the process, realize they're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. So if you're coming in with the attitude of, well, they should want to work here and we're going to make it as hard as possible, I'm not saying anyone would do that, but that's not the right attitude. The right attitude is to roll out the red carpet, because this is an experienced tech that might get you $1 million over the next year, is to make them feel really wanted.
That was really good, Chip. And in fact, someone from the audience said, great points about speed, agility, and user-friendly process that's painless and engaging. And we talked to Dorian about this same thing. And you both, one of the first things when I said, what are some, struggles? What are some areas, some obstacles? And both of you basically said something to the effect of, these guys can tear apart a really complex engine and rebuild it. However, their career has not been built around filling out job applications perfectly and making them look as professional as possible. So your whole emphasis shouldn't be on application and making the application looks impressive. It's like you need to talk to them quickly and make it as quickly as possible. On that front, I have a couple stats that I want to throw in here, and then we have a couple questions that I want to get to so I don't miss them. One stat, 69 or nearly 70%, it's like 69.5% would prefer to be called. So if you're going to reach out and call an application, would prefer to be called either early in the morning on a weekday or after 5 on a weekday. So These are active guys. They're working during the day.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to call them and make them step away from work, you're much less likely to actually talk to them.
Let's kind of reframe that. Only 30% really want to be talked to during working hours. So my question to you guys watching is, what are you going to do about it? That's all I got. I mean, my thing is you're gonna have to adjust. I mean, this is the market.
Don't drop our mic. It's an expensive mic.
Sorry, don't drop the mic. Yeah, I'm not gonna drop. But I mean, my thing is, if you're gonna have to reach them after 5, and nope, we shut everything down at 4:30.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. You are thereby limiting yourself to only really or engaging with about 30% of the people that you could. Or you're just gonna anger people, miss people, frustrate people. And your application process just got more challenging. So to Chip's point, the people that make it easy, they win.
Okay.
So what are you going to do about it?
I got a couple questions I want to get to. This is kind of back on some of the culture stuff, and I'll throw this to both of you. When rebuilding a company's image that has been bad in the technician community, how do you get the message out to people that are looking that you are re-imaging and restructuring? So if you had some culture problems in the past, you fixed them. Mm-hmm. How do you communicate that out to the broader audience that, hey, we've restructured, we've changed some things, we've fixed some of the dysfunction that we had?
I think you got it. I'm gonna be real quick, Chip. Then I'm gonna kick it to you. I think you've got to not necessarily acknowledge it publicly. I think you've got to tell the story of what you're doing now. You got to capture that. And I don't think it needs to come necessarily from leadership. I would try to get that to come from someone that it's making an impact on, the technicians in this case. Mm-hmm. I want to capture that. And then I want to get that in front of other technicians so that now I've got that peer advocacy going on with what I've been working on.
What would you add to that, Chip?
I would actually say exactly the same thing. It's not about you see the under new management sign. That's not what you're not trying to deal with it from a negative perspective. I think What Kyle said is, you're going to talk about what you are doing, what you're doing differently, and make sure that's being messaged out as many ways as you can, including by word of mouth, because if you're doing it, that's going to happen. I think that's the key.
All right. I got another question here I want to get to. It says, how do you really target inactive job seekers? So I'm going to answer how we do it. I don't know how other people do it. They probably don't do it as well.
There's a reason we're in business.
Yeah. The way we do it is a couple of ways, and Chip mentioned several of these, and so did Kyle mention a couple of these. One is we have proprietary contact data for technicians, and that's based off of tool purchases that they have made in the past. We use that audience and target them on platforms that allow you to target contact data, such as Meta, the Google Display Network, YouTube, Instagram. Many platforms allow you to target our first party data that way. So that's one way. Secondly, as Chip said, because we have so much time in the industry and we've been doing this a long time, we've built up networks of people. So often we may be recruiting for one client, a lead comes in and they're not quite the right certification for this particular, maybe they need to be, a Chevy mechanic, and this person, but they were a Ford mechanic. Well, now that person is part of our database and able to say like, hey, we actually have some people that would be the perfect fit for you. Their experience, we've talked to them, they're great. They just didn't quite have the right certification for this other thing, but they'd be perfect for you. And then referrals. So these are kind of the big 3 ways that we're reaching people who are not necessarily actively looking for jobs.
So on the subject of referrals, 1, I think you got to pay people when they refer somebody. 2, I think you got to celebrate the person who got you the referral as well, to some degree. Keep up with a scoreboard potentially. But how much do you advertise internally to the people who are doing the role right now? How much do you advertise to them about your referral program? Or is it, hey, and when you come to work here, anybody that you refer, they get $500, and that's all they hear about it? Or do you reframe that? So-and-so bought a 4-wheeler last year because of all the referrals they brought in. Kind of trying to make that into something a little more personal. Mm-hmm. And consistently remind people, change it a little bit. So now you've got a story to tell them. That referral piece is way underutilized. It's a awesome, helpful tool, A, to build culture, and B, to use as a recruiting tool as well.
All right. I'm going to try and do a wrap up, and then I'm going to kick it to both of you to have final words on my wrap up, and then we'll answer any questions that come in. But before we do, I'm going to launch one final poll about just how much of experience quality technicians means for your revenue and what you're able to do.
Big money question.
So that poll is launched. I will add it to the stage. How much parts and service revenue does a quality tech generate in 1 month? Curious to see what people say. And this is specific to you. But let me kind of wrap this up. So the whole basis of this is most people struggle with quality more than quantity.
Okay.
Quality technicians don't switch jobs as often. They're probably earning a pretty good salary, but they're not actively looking for other jobs. However, most of them, it does seem there is some wiggle room in there that presented with the right offer, they would be willing to switch places. Now, in order to do that, you have to be able to get the right messaging in front of people that are not actively looking for jobs. There will be some active job seekers in there that you can reach through job boards, maybe even using a partner to help you execute some of that. That is a component, but a strong component of how you reach quality technicians has to be people who are not actively in the job market. And then finally, and probably some of the biggest piece, is once you get someone an application in, one of these quality, hard to find ones, and there's so much competition, as Chip said, they're probably looking at another offer. You can't fumble the ball here. You have to be quick. You have to be agile. You have to make sure that you're not asking them to fill out really lengthy applications before you've even had a conversation. If they need to talk to multiple people, then get a panel together and talk to them so that you're making sure you're making use of their time. Remember, they're probably not going to sit there and talk to you all day because they're busy at work. So when you talk to them, it's probably going to be first thing in the morning or after work hours. Kyle, I'll let you go first, and then Chip, I'll give you the final word depending on what questions come in. But Kyle, go ahead. What would you add to that?
I would just kind of reemphasize that yes, Indeed is a big piece. There are other pieces that need to be in play. That applies to no matter the density of the market or the population of the market. If it's major metro or rural, there, I got it out.
That's good.
I think you got to have, we call it performance marketing, but you got to have kind of a collection of things in play, working for you. Tell the story of what it's like working there. And if you don't know what that story is, find it. And then I think you need to make sure you're looking at the things internally that I can make better so that I can have some advocates and I can get some stories to go and tell. And that's just going to make the whole operation better overall, I think.
All right. And Chip, what would you add to that?
Sure. I think we covered the key aspects. The three things I would say are, if we're going to find them, cast a wide net. I know we talked about that. Give them a reason to come. And if you've got them already, give them a reason to stay because it's easier to retain them than to find them. And then the final thing is make it as easy and fast as possible because it's the technician's market. And that's it.
Perfectly said. Both of you did a really good job. Thank you for coming on. We have one question. I'll keep asking questions. Before I get to this question, I'm going to do a quick wrap up. If you have any topics that you would ever want us to cover on Digging Deeper, feel free to throw it in the Q&A. Feel free to reach out to me personally, davidarsenal@randallreilly.com. This episode will be up on YouTube no later than Monday. That will be on YouTube plus randallreilly.com. Anything I'm missing here?
I wish y'all could see what's happening on the other side of the camera.
They're giving me cues. Once again, thanks big time to Chip. He, our internal consultant over at the RPO group. If you're not familiar,
phenomenal talented group of people.
Our recruitment process outsourcing has really rounded out what we're able to do here at Randall Reilly, so that from finding and sourcing all the way to interviewing, we really touch every part of the process.
Call it cradle to grave on hiring.
Yep,
they're unbelievable.
All right. Another question, and I think this is a very appropriate question, says, we live in recruitment and we understand these value pieces, and how would you gain buy-in from the C-suite executives that are, more old school, traditional environment, a gentleman's handshake, you want a job, come to me kind of attitude. I think when you're talking to the C-suite, talk in terms of value added. If we look at the poll that we just launched and we see, I'm going to add it back to the stage.
I think, so most of them were over 30.
How much parts and service revenue does a quality tech generate in 1 month? So if we look at the amount of revenue loss based off of unfilled positions, I think that is the route you take. And you say, look, it may cost a little bit more to have a more robust health insurance package. It may cost a little bit more to invest in programs that place our ads and our messaging in front of inactive job seekers. But the revenue gain from scoring 3 or 4 of these quality technicians far outweigh. It is 100%. There is 100% in ROI in investing in these types of things. So I think that's kind of the language that you'd want to use. Chip or Kyle, would you add anything?
I would add just a couple of things. That's the practical piece. And we all know a lot of upper management, they're going to think very practically. What is this going to cost me? What is this going to earn me? Sort of a lifetime value calculation, of the in a year or over 3 years, if I get this person hired, this is the value to the business. And this is what we need to change. So kind of this is the cost of what I need to change. But I think it's going to make us better. I think you can also get into the emotional piece of it with those folks too. I actually talked to 5 of our technicians, and this is what I learned, and this is why I'm trying to solve this. And I think if they kind of see that problem that you're trying to solve, that kind of gets some emotional buy-in from them as well. And then the last thing that we've learned here corporately, probably in the last year, make it easy for someone at the C-suite to make a decision and get moving. They don't want a complicated 9-month onboarding ramp up or whatever. They're looking to make it easy and smooth. And so anything you can do when communicating with them or getting started, make it easy for them to say yes and then get going. So don't make it this long 6-month process where you're dragging this out with them. If they're ready to make a decision, make it smooth and simple and quick.
All right, Chip, you get the final word before we jump off of here.
I agree with all of that. The one thing I would add is the C-suite wants buy-in from their entire organization. So I would, if possible, make sure I've got advocates already that I can bring to them. And if not, show the value to the overall organization and not just to the individual.
That was great. In fact, we've been talking a lot about the idea of that consensus. Consensus is one of the number one buying motivations and for people in companies. All right. I don't see any other questions. You guys seeing any other questions? Am I missing some? Make sure my computer's not behind here. All right. I appreciate so much everyone that took the time to join us. As we said, this will be up on YouTube and on randallreilly.com no later than Monday. I appreciate everyone so much. We'll see you next month with another Digging Deeper.